welcome to the SolarCoaster, a renewable energy themed talk show right here in lovely Maui County.
Now in 2030, we're going to have 60 gigawatts of more nationally demand on the system, and we're going to retire 140 gigawatts of generation.
We're at a point of inflection where we need to think about charting a new path as to what our future looks like, and as I said on the panel, it's our utility is one of the leaders in having to reinvent themselves and think about how do they do what they need to do in a very hybrid kind of grid and do it profitably and sustainably and resiliently.
An affordable future for Lahaina, but also for the rest of our state. So hopefully we can kind of use the ability, what we do there to sort of inform a statewide conversation about how we move forward.
Yeah.
Aloha, 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 aloha.
And welcome to the SolarCoaster live show here in February of 2024 with Mr. Vericart, myself, Josh Porter, here in our Makawao studio. We just came off of the first ever inaugural RE+Hawaii in late January, just about a week ago.
You said February. I'm like, yeah, it is.
It's February.
It's
February. Quite an experience. What did you think about this whole shebang, Jay?
I was really impressed with the show as a whole. RE+ really knocked it out of the park, exceeded all expectations with attendance. We had almost double what I think they expected.
Yeah, 700, 800 people, something like that.
Certainly more
That's
than most people thought. A lot of personalities in the room. It was exactly what I hoped for. We had folks coming in and actually dialoguing about the real problems that we face. It's not just a rah-rah solar event. It's how are we going to solve these problems? And everybody brought their A game. There were a lot of opinions in the room, but there's a lot of positive discussion, and I think we have a much better sense of where we are and a few routes forward for sure.
Yeah, it was the first time. I mean, we of course we have other shows in Hawaii, and we've been to other RE+ shows around the world. But for us, this was special. Obviously, we were, had a hand in the development from a few years past and over the course of the last year. But to see the solar industry, a good chunk of people from the West Coast, come together with people from Hawaii, all the energy people were pretty much there, and then think kind of critically about what's happening with energy today in this very unique place. And when I hear us say this all the time, Hawaii is a unique place, but the bottom line is you got the first RPS, first renewable portfolio standard of 100%, right?
Yep.
That's years past. You got the first, in a sense, in the United States, as far as I know it, dissolution of, finishing of the subscribing to NEM back in 15, and then, of course, just these past couple of months, we have the deletion of grandfathered in NEM accounts on the docket that's labeled final order.
Yeah.
And we cover a lot of this. This is really like one of the overarching themes of this show, and everyone kind of wants to talk about this issue, but of course there's only so much that can be talked about with an like a pending order, is that what the language was? A ongoing order.
That's what everybody
docket,
was addressed in the very first session. The elephant in the room. That's literally what he said. Let's address the elephant in the room. It's not final because it's not actually.
Well, unfortunately, because it is an ongoing docket and because especially there's a motion pending in that docket, I am prohibited from saying anything that's substantive about it.
Yeah.
Other than what I tried to communicate on stage, which is that, that docket inherently is a collaborative docket. It's meant to be that way. It's meant to try to innovate and try to get to the right answer in terms of how, not just how you can successfully integrate DERs into the grid, but how those DER systems can support the grid, right?
Past, it's still up. There's a potential for reevaluation, and there's a motion to reevaluate right now, but it didn't sound like that was going to happen. So it's really kind of a contentious situation.
What I thought was cool, I mean, we'll talk about some of the different educational sessions that we were able to watch and then do some recap interviews on, and then the show itself, the expo hall and the reception and everything that happened in the environment. We'll chat a little bit about this stuff and try to, I think our goal here is to try to share, peel back the curtain a little bit on what that experience was like in Hawaii for people that maybe didn't get a chance to attend, and people that were there to maybe be able to revisit it and say, what was this all about?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm sure there's sessions that people missed. I'd like to communicate to folks like why you would want to come to it. I mean, Hawaii, great. Yeah, you can come to Hawaii in January. You know, it's a fantastic business expense if you can make that happen.
Yeah.
But they're real business cases. We are so far ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
The discussions, I mean, everybody's going to be facing these issues.
Yeah.
California's like right behind us. But there were folks here from Texas and decent other places across the U.S. I talked to so many people from mainland that were coming to find out what their future looks like.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, we definitely ran into people, and Texas kept coming up.
Yeah, Texas is like also right there.
And guys doing really interesting things. Like, this is the wild stuff. You know, looking at, ground mounting systems that are working well, that are creating some innovation and some cost savings, but on huge solar farms, right? And trying to get into this market.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
Everything's bigger in Texas, yeah. And then, I mean, we talked to the LG guys, and there was this storied history of LG. Of course, we have in Hawaii, we have the, we're touching on some of the expo hall conversations, which actually we didn't get a chance to do nearly as much as we wanted to because we were tied to the agenda. But in the expo hall, there was, a handful of great companies, some of the usual suspects, some new guys like we were talking about. But for example, the LG conversation.
Preponderance of batteries.
Batteries. Everybody's got a battery. We were joking that, every company now has a battery, right? Yep. Because they're weight labeling batteries, right?
Yeah.
And just as a little context before we, cart horse this whole thing, Hawaii has about a 90% battery attachment rate. And this new docket, it essentially
is going to force it to 100%.
well, yeah. I mean, the new docket actually,
but not the way they think.
Yeah, we'll talk about the docket too. There's a lot here, folks. There's a lot, but let's try to get some context on pieces at a time. So, looking at the fact that solar here, you basically need batteries, and you have even with the previous programs, the tariff programs that are in place. Some of them were generous, some of them not so much, but the new programs look like they're going to essentially disincentivize interaction with the grid, which is problematic. And so we were talking a lot about that. That's actually due to take shape to be implemented March 1st, if I'm not mistaken, which is crazy. It's
less than a month
February
away from
5th right now.
Yeah.
So we're talking about removing of NEM. We're talking about removing of, I think, battery bonus. We're talking about removing of the post-NEM tariffs like CGS Plus and all the other little iterative acronyms. And in moving into this new TOU system and BYOD system, bring your own device system for grid services, neither of which in the current language look to be to incentivize people, and the industry is reasonably concerned. We had a great, what was that language that Brad used that you loved?
Oh, mandatory reverse arbitrage.
Mandatory reverse.
Buy high, sell low.
It's not a good...
Learned through battery bonus what it takes to move the market, what's fair.
Yeah.
And then the new tariff came out, and instead of getting $850 upfront payment, you get I don't know what the amount is, but it's capped at $500.
It's very small. Yeah. It's very small.
And so I have 2 batteries in my house. A lot of people have 3. It doesn't matter. It's like you're not being compensated fairly for the amount of power you're putting on the grid because they capped it.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, you export well below retail. and you only get still the $5 a month or $10 a month, depending.
Is not a good look at docket, folks.
Yeah.
And so of course, we were able to hear from the one of the public utilities commissioners, and I think his language was that it was a dynamic process with the spirit of, I don't think he said aloha, but there was a spirit of let's find the right result, right?
Sure.
And of course, there's a motion to reconsider from some of the other participants in this program, and they basically they're kind of waiting for a response.
Right.
They're not, and there was some language that said that the motion to reconsider wasn't really warranted as well, right?
Yeah.
So on the PU side of the discussion, it seemed like there was this perspective on dynamism and things could change and lack of finality. On the other side of the perspective, kind of lobbying for the industry and the small business owners that own solar and the clients and account holders themselves, the homeowners themselves, our community, there was this real, I would say, I don't like the word palpable, but that's, I think, the right one right now, palpable, almost fear. And I, in a very concerned way, I spoke to a handful of people in the industry as solar guys, solar installation company owners, that just last year were like, hey, we're booming, we're doing great. We survived the 15 era where NEM went away. We figured out the battery world where Tesla came in and all the other players came in, right, to actually provide on-grid batteries. From 2015 to end of 2015, 2016, all the way through to 2023, 2024. That was that arc, and these fellas survived that. And these warriors, these solar warriors, that's actually
little scarred, a little battered, but much better for it. Just to put that in perspective for folks, I mean, our true retail rate NEM went away just at the time where batteries were kind of percolating onto the market. So there wasn't really a real go-to technology.
Oh no,
we never had the technology. So it's always that juxtaposition of what the technology is versus what the policy is, and we didn't quite have the actual battery tech to really make that happen. But it came up as our retail rate NEM went away.
Well, we had, right, because you're saying it was incentivized because it was a strong ROI, right? Yeah. So there was,
but the technology wasn't available, and that was a real concern for people.
The end of 2015, I remember as a solar installation company owner trying to take off-grid technology and make it work for on-grid applications.
Yeah.
And what that means is effectively, well, that's where everyone knows Powerwall now, but Powerwall didn't exist back then.
Right.
And so there were a couple of companies that were talking about having it. Turned out they really did not.
Yep.
And what that really needs to do, just like the system that I have now was a system that I wanted and was trying to design back in 2016.
Right, but it took 5 years to get it.
It took some time. And then around 17 or late 16, probably 17, I can't remember exactly. It might have been more towards 16. The Tesla came out. Mm-hmm. And Tesla, Tesla was seen as a company with some muscle and some innovation capability.
They were just rolling out gigafactories and batteries after that Panasonic deal had gone through. I want to point out that it's really, I kind of appreciate the fact that NEM went away for that reason. It gave companies a market to sell battery technology into. I mean, that's kind of the necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
Yes. We had an absolute need for these batteries, and so they materialized.
Yeah.
And so there was a bit of an adjustment period, but at the end of this 5-year adjustment period, we're in a much better space. And I have to wonder, take that perspective, does this docket really matter? In another 5 years, are we going to be in a better place?
Well, yeah. I mean, no, it's a great point. It's a great point. You have the impact that this makes on the homeowners, having to the electricity costs that they have to bear, the business itself, the solar installation owners, the manufacturers. This whole industry is. We named this show the SolarCoaster 6-7 years ago because of this volatility.
Yeah.
And of course, but looking at it's hard to take that. What's the word? It's hard to take that kind of austerity approach when you're living it in the meat of it, because it's so
rough, it's tumultuous.
It's so dangerous for these companies. And these companies, I give them a lot of props. They move in this industry, and you have to have a certain degree of faith, and you have to want to do it for not just money and not just success, but you have to kind of have a certain love for solar.
Yep.
Right. And but to see them going through it again now, and to see some of the new guys that were really doing well, I'm looking at a couple of companies that were kind of came up over the last few years and are actually did really well on a revenue basis. To know what they're going to go through.
Yeah, they don't actually have the perspective.
I don't know.
Maybe some of their employees do.
They're pretty sophisticated guys, but I feel concerned for them. Yeah. And what that means, folks, is that you're talking about basically this new docket, which could be something that we see across the country. We hope it doesn't happen, but this could be replicated in the future to other environments.
It's almost inevitable. I mean, the utilities exist to make money.
Right. Well, they're removing incentive. So basically, NEM is one for one. You create kilowatt hours. You either use it or you feed it into the grid. Later on, you pull those out of the grid. You get a debit and a credit. It's easy, right? Yeah. And you're here.
Well, the accounting is easy. Yeah.
Well, and the technology is easier relative, right?
Now,
because you're just talking about solar and inversion, and you're really just it's a pretty simple, elegant solution. And that was pretty straightforward. And now we're in a place where there's on-grid batteries, and there's a lot more system components. There's load control panels and things of that nature. Yep. There's arbitrage happening, meaning like, you know that your export over the last few years was probably less than retail. So you're trying to consume more energy because that's offsetting full retail.
Yep.
And now
TOUs have come around.
Yeah, and now we're actually in a place where just Maui now submitted or put out an article saying Maui Hawaiian Electric provides the opportunity for people to sign up for TOU rates, right? Yep. But those are really concerning because those TOU rates, they could be you're going to get dinged really high in the peak period.
Yep.
The duck curve at the evening end of the day, and probably there's 3 rate structures, and alongside of that, when you have a renewable energy system, you're going to get a very small export rate. The proposed rate is 6.6 cents per kilowatt hour in Maui during the day.
Right.
So if you're coming off of, there's a lot going on there. But if you come off of NEM, right, like you,
yep,
right,
yep.
And you're getting you have a modestly sized system to in an energy efficient home for the most part, and you are getting your full 1-to-1 retail NEM, right? Presumably, you're going to get some word, in the next month or so that's no longer the case.
Yep.
Right? It's going to be very interesting. Oh my goodness, everyone's because most people aren't thinking about this stuff.
No, most people are not not at all.
Right?
That's the thing, and I'm in a kind of unique position where
I'm
privy to all this information. But I mean, the docket hasn't been truly finalized yet until they
it says final order.
Yeah, it does.
But so the point here, folks, is that when that happens, and we're talking about largely about residential sector here. Yep. What comes of that? Do we get a spur if the homeowner can understand this, or if the installation companies can explain it adequately and concisely in a succinct manner, and they can say, hey, there's no reason to bother with any of these export programs. They're confusing and they're disincentivizing you, right? You might as well just offset as much as possible. There should be a surge in battery adoption.
The math only works that way. Yeah, there should be more batteries, and it's very simple. The conversation is very simple. Every kilowatt hour you can offset and self-consume is one you don't have to pay for.
That's it.
So
then the game becomes and you may think, oh, what's the problem with that? Well, you need enough batteries on a daily 24-hour, call it arbitrage basis,
sure,
to basically run your system, store your energy, and use that through the night.
Right.
And then the next day, refill your system, right?
Yep.
And so in the case of a NEM account holder, what does that mean is what I want to walk through, because that means that they may have a system that's 10, 15 years old. It may require, you're probably going to come in with if you don't touch it, you're probably going with an AC coupled solution, right? Mm-hmm. Like a Powerwall or a Franklin or a, you name your.
There's more than a half dozen.
Yeah.
I was going to say a half dozen, but it's actually way more than that.
Yeah. And okay, so now you basically retrofit that old system. It's probably what it's going to start to look like.
Sure.
Or alternatively, you say, you know what, this system's kind of getting old. yank it off, give me a brand spanking new one, and I'm going to throw some money into it. And then you're in a situation where you go,
well, luckily enough, a lot of those NEM systems have paid for themselves already. So, folks are in a really good position that way. I mean, they can leverage conduit and stuff that's already been installed. They kind of know the ins and outs of having a solar system. Yeah. But the panels have gotten way better. Remember, my old NEM had 180 watt panels. Panel technology has moved on.
Oh, Jay had the old Enphase like M180s or something, right? So, and then you had maybe some. You look kind of full. Anyway, you had some panels that were in a similar territory.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, this is very, very early days. So you can get much better energy density in the same footprint these days.
Right.
And that's a real requirement because now we're talking about EVs. Right. And you don't want to charge an EV from the utility here. It's going to cost too much.
Yeah, and I'm actually doing that in the evening because I don't have enough energy storage yet. So here's the thing, and also you get emerging bidirectionality, which we cover in this session. So there was about let me take a look at this session notes here. So this agenda was really I thought it was well put together. We had a hand in that. We worked with Kathy and
don't break your arm.
What's that?
Don't break your arm.
Don't break your arm.
Pat yourself on the back.
Oh, I got you. I thought I was like gonna hit something. No, but I mean, it was I say that partly boastfully, I suppose, but I mean more because it was interesting for me to see how these sessions were developed.
Sure.
So and to give RE+ a lot of credit, I mean, they really are professionals.
Oh yeah.
They understand how to navigate with the recommendations and the guidance of local experts and people in the field. Doug McLeod and myself were involved in the educational process from day one. And the SolarCoaster, was really, proud to be a part of that. And it was fun. Never did that before. So we were able to say, hey, here are some of the main topics that we think need to be addressed. They broke down into educational sessions that went through to SEPA and SIA, and they gave their feedback and their dialogue, and they were like, yeah, we like this, we don't like this too much, And it was really collaborative, though. There was a lot of back and forth and a lot of respect in that process. And I think because of that, once you got those sessions kind of figured out, then you were able to go into the industry itself and find the people that could best speak to that particular issue. And we had 2 full days essentially, and some great, and it was a beautiful room in Alohilani at the Stingray Room, and we were set up right outside with our little interview session, and our goal was kind of to capture some of the gems of those longer format discussions and kind of make a little sense out of it, right? Essentially. So, we had an opening session, and then we did get to have an Oli. I didn't get a video. Maybe I do have a video of that. I think I do. Yes. We had an Oli for folks from outside of Hawaii. Oli is essentially a native Hawaiian blessing.
Welcoming all of you here to RE+Hawaii. May you come together as one and with your minds of great knowledge find the solutions we need to make Hawaii and the rest of the world a better place for the future, and that is our children. The Oli Aloha, it welcomes everyone from wherever walk of life. When you come together as one, you become ohana. For the next 2 days, you will come together. You will share your thoughts, your minds, and your wisdom with hopes of making this place wonderful for all. From our Hawaii and our ohana here at Alohilani, I share with you the Oli Aloha. O na mea I talo me tale hua e alile hua no I anaka no e kau no I e ano I ne alingane o I o kauki mai ai ki mai no ko ai ki pume ke aloha e aloha e aloha e aloha aloha.
Certainly puts things in perspective every time. I mean,
yeah, it's something that's really special, and I'm so glad that was incorporated. And so this fella, he was able to explain, what the Oli meant, and then we kind of got us all into the same kind of mindset of, all right, we're here in Hawaii. We're here in Hawaii to do something of value, and community became this kind of overarching talking point throughout all of the sessions, right? Yeah. Outreach to the community dialogue. Strangely enough, there wasn't, now these shows are not inexpensive, right? You have to pay to attend, so it's not like it's always going to be in the budget of every nonprofit to come out. But I did meet Henry Curtis said there was only one community member, unfortunately, at the sesh. So that's kind of a bummer. So maybe we can do better in the future in making a home for other community members. I think actually it's something that I suggested. but nonetheless, the one person, this is crazy. This is a crazy story. The one person that was from the community that was there, her name is escaping me right now, but she's from West Oahu in the community of Waianae. And I was getting coffee. I saw her and I said, and we're a little tired. We're doing a lot of different stuff. And I said, I know you. Yeah. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm not sure. And I was like, and I looked at her tag and it said something about Waianae. Now Waianae is an area where many of the Native Hawaiians live in that environment. There are some social and problems in the environment. There's some poverty. I actually had been out there 20 years ago prior to moving to Hawaii with the Peace Boat organization.
One of those trips.
On essentially a community exchange, right? I brought my daughter, who was 6 months old at the time, from Tokyo, flew her and my wife out. We were staying in Makaha, and we had this amazing house that we rented on the ocean. It was unreal. And we were doing exchange programs for when the ship came in. We were organizing exchange programs, right? And one of the groups was the Women of Waianae. And we did like lei making, and we picked plumeria, and we went to like the lohi, and we learned about some agriculture related to taro and stuff like that. And it was that was the thing that got us stoked on Hawaii, right? And the woman that I met at this show was a member from the Women of Waianae.
Okay.
Yeah. And she goes, I remember you. Whoa, right? And then she goes, what do you do? And I go, I got in solar and I did this. I explained like in 20 seconds what I did. And I go, we do a podcast called the SolarCoaster. And she goes, get out of here. I listen to you. We don't have loads of listeners. So that's really an accomplishment.
Yeah. So well, AM/FM radio here is a big deal, but I mean, there's only so many people on the island, so yeah.
So community outreach, Jay, that was the thing. That blew my mind.
That topic came up again and again and again. And that's one of the things we really need to communicate about Hawaii. If you want to do business here, you're going to run into the same people again and again and again.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the active people are very active.
Very much so.
Wear lots of hats.
Very much so. So, these agenda points, I'll just give you guys a heads up on some of this. The general session, we've got a couple of we got recordings from 3 of the members of the general session. Yep. Lorraine Akiba and Colin Yost from the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission and Christopher Yunker from Hawaii State Energy Office. We cover we talked to those speakers and got some great feedback on their perspectives. So
I always use the analogy, we're like in a canoe, and we need to make sure we row in the canoe in the same direction, or it's just going to go around in circles. And so that is the visual, I think, that drives us in Hawaii. We are in a canoe facing the headwinds and the challenges ahead, whether it's climate change impacts or limited resources or geopolitical events, because we sit in the Pacific Ocean in a very turbulent geopolitical time and have key roles to play.
The community and the broader public who aren't really involved in energy sector and don't really want to be, but it's going to be more and more impacts on them, and that really is truly one of the biggest barriers to achieving 100% is going to be that community acceptance. And while we see it in Hawaii first, everywhere in the country is going to have that kind of discussion, because even if they can develop renewable resources in remote locations, you still have to build transmission to get there. And there's all that infrastructure, and they still have the charging solutions for transportation and things like that. That land use and community impacts are just going to be something universal for everyone.
We had also, utility scale solar, right? We were able to talk with, let's see here, Samantha Ruiz, Department of Energy from
U.S. Department of
Energy. Andrew Larson from AES Hawaii. So we spoke with her for a little while. We'll get a chance to hear the perspective of both the developer and then someone from the Department of Energy on utility scale projects in Hawaii. And we talked about siting.
So, Kirsten, I understand that you're a Makawao resident, which is where I live. So we are neighbors.
We're Makawawians.
Makawawians. I call it the wow.
Wow. I like that.
Yeah,
I think we should do a new bumper
one,
sticker.
Right? Up in Makawao, up in the wow.
We should say keep it wow. We actually have 2 projects that are still in development, soon to be under construction as part of the Stage 2 awards. I think there were 16 total projects that were awarded in Stage 2. I do believe Amoresco, one of our competitors, again, on the Department of Defense's land over in Waipio, is still moving forward. But yes, AES has 2 projects on Oahu.
And then Maui, but the Maui, you've got one going on right now, right?
Yes, Kuihilani is a 60 megawatt, 240 megawatt hour battery storage project. It is on the island of Maui in central Maui. Right. It was part of the Stage 1 awards. It has been delayed because of, kind of the aftermath of COVID and some supply chain issues. But scheduled to come online very soon.
Right.
Yes.
And that's really substantial from the perspective of Maui. It may not sound big in other places around the world, but that's a huge system for us, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I had the privilege of working in Hawaii before I joined the department for about 8 years or so. And really there's been a constant thread that more community engagement is needed in every part of the development process. We're moving towards a world, or we've been living in a world where more integration of community in the process overall is necessary. It can't just be checking the box, doing stakeholder engagement meetings. It has to be allowing the community to have a seat at the table and really think about the project design, the project site, the types of benefits that the community wants. In all of the RFPs and the developer's perspective, as they, in preparing for this panel, was doing some research, and it shocked me to find out, I think Columbia Law School did a report in 2022 that showed that 30% of project failures were due to a lack of community engagement, a lack of transparency in the process. And so I think what we heard on the panel is that we need more education, we need more opportunities for engagement, and really we need to rethink the process overall and really think about bringing community into the design of these projects versus just having them say yes or no to something that's already been pre-built.
Yeah, it's super interesting for me to hear something like that, because my vision is, for, at least for the majority of communities, they don't care as long as they can plug in the outlet. It works, but it's really not like that in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, consent is a huge issue. I think we're seeing that more and more in so many different aspects of our world and society today, but I think that's really just the bottom line, that the question that a lot of communities are asking is, did you ask us? I mean, where is our agency in this matter? We live here, we own land here, we own homes here. Yes, we believe in a renewable energy future, and we also should be valued and appreciated enough to be asked how we are shaping our renewable energy future, because, fact is, a lot of projects have been placed in frontline communities that often are carrying the burden of infrastructure that they didn't ask for. I think it's just a coming of the time.
And we talked about siting issues. We often brought up Pa'iahu and Maui. We heard the term NIMBY to YIMBY. I actually hadn't heard the term YIMBY
so
yet.
these are things that are a little controversial. Can you use that term?
Right, we were told that's a negative word.
It's a negative word. How else do you describe it? I mean, people just, we want this thing, and you ask anybody, we want solar, we want renewables. It's Hawaii. We should have all this stuff, but not here.
Yeah.
It's got to go somewhere. The island's only so big. We got to have real conversations about how that's going to work. And there's so much disinformation. I think that was a big problem over the past RFP phase 2 was that there's just so much disinformation out there. You get one person who's spreading like EMF rumors or whatever else, or it's going to send reflective concentrated. So that's a real problem. So community engagement, nipping those in the bud, and just communicating clearly like what this is actually how it's going to benefit their lives, but also what it's really going to look like in the end. You know, the VR AR kind of conversation is actually a really big deal, because you can literally show people what it's going to look like. What are the actual sight lines?
This is great.
You know, those types of things.
There were two things that stood out in my mind. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's kind of one of them, really. But the timing of site determination in the RFP process. We had heard this earlier, but we talked to some people about it here at these interviews, and that seems to be a key piece of the puzzle, because the way it has worked in the past is, there we go, there's the roosters. I don't know if you guys caught that in the background, but that's Maui. If essentially companies would come out and do what was called land control.
Yep.
You know, some of my friends work in that space, and that's all about getting a hold of some of the ranchers that own big plots of land that happen to be close enough to the transmission lines, and then essentially capturing that. And that gives that group the ability to bid on those projects. Yeah. But the problem is that land is not, you know, it's not in a vacuum. It's around other people.
Right.
And later on down the road, they may already have been awarded because the pricing was good and the company had the capacity to do it, and they did a great job with the proposal. But then all of a sudden, you start to hear from the community at this community engagement phase, "Hey, we're going to put in a solar farm," and they're like, "No."
Yeah.
And then then you get a problem. So the idea was to bring that earlier.
Yep.
In the process, and the community itself, and we did talk to Leilani Chow of Molokai, and she basically really did an amazing job, a dissertation, a book of community engagement in determining how the energy systems are going to take shape in the island of Molokai. So maybe a bit of a model, and that was so early on that it's pre-RFP, and they know where they want it to go right now. They have like a series of 1 megawatt sites around the island for each area. They've all dialogued at length about this.
Molokai is a kind of an interesting case, because there's not too many people living on the island, and they're all very involved in the community. You know, they all, and if you think Maui, everybody knows each other. Molokai is another, a whole nother level.
We're talking about 5,000 people.
But they're all interested. And now they're all educated, which is
they're
exactly
educated deeply educated about renewables. Yes,
and what the SolarCoaster kind of wanted to do is just bring the general education level up, so we can have these conversations.
Right.
And if you don't even know what you don't know, it's really hard to have the conversation and ask questions that matter to you. So I think she handled it right. You know, just getting everybody involved, and they get to pick their sites. You know, where do we want to put it?
Yes, totally different ballgame, and you know, and it's hard to say that itself exact model can be replicated, but there's lessons learned. Right. So that conversation with Leilani Chow was great. That was the only session out of the 15 or so that I neglected to record on the Black Magic. So we're gonna have
I'm not gonna fault you. It was late. We were very tired.
But
I did record the audio, so we've got something to.
And we've got the book too, so we can take some of those screenshots, because that's actually a lot of.
My understanding is it's available online. We'll make sure that's in the description. In the description,
yeah.
Issues of top-down energy planning that don't only affect Molokai, it's everywhere.
Right.
And so we did add like a huge methodology section, explaining some of our, strategies for outreach and engagement and our education. We also have an appendix that's about the same size as this report that has like all of our slideshows and resources that we actually took out to the community.
And people can access this, you said, right?
Yep.
It's online?
Yep.
Where can they find it?
Right now it's just a file in Dropbox, but we have a webpage called the MolokaiCleanEnergyHui.org.
Okay, so they contact
you there. And so you can, or you can download it straight from there.
Oh, cool. Oh, great. So there you go. All right, well, Leilani Chow, thanks for being on the SolarCoaster again. And it's great to hear about the Molokai CRAP, that's how you phrase it, right? And look forward to seeing those systems get installed at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? And then coming out there and checking them out. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Right? So thank you so much, and aloha.
Anytime.
All right.
Thank you much.
And then grid modernization and clean energy technology was the next one, innovation for a sustainable energy future. So we had a chance, Sarah Jane was there, Amadeo from Enphase, right? Mm-hmm. We had some people from Swell, a VPP company, right? Swell, I think. Yep. Sean Jacobson, and actually had a Hawaiian Electric person there, Bryant Como, and Steve
brave man,
given everything that's going on out here with, of course, the wildfires and all of the. It's a contentious time.
No, I'm going to say that again. I really appreciate all the speakers that came up.
Yeah,
they really brought their A game. The conversations were deep, meaningful, a lot of perspective. Some heated personalities in the room sometimes, but I mean, they really. It was a fantastic show because of them.
Yeah, and we spoke with Stephen Rimshaw. Where is he? Spoke with Stephen Rimshaw for a bit, and I thought it was the end.
You can cut that bit.
Yeah, okay. Where is he? There he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Steve. So Stephen is a really smart guy, and interestingly enough, I just ran into him yesterday down at Home Depot in Maui.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Hey, you're up on my editing board at the moment, right?"
Yeah.
And we were dialoguing about, of course, this issue, right? And so I think here, you have a guy that works for Sunrun for 8 years. He's really deep into this space, and I think he was skeptical and concerned.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
So when you looked at Colin's perspective, it was kind of more of a, hey, we're in this dialogue about this docket. And Stephen's perspective was like, hey, we have a motion to reconsider, as well as Rocky from HSCA.
Yep.
But I saw concern on their faces, like, this stuff needs to change.
Successfully integrate DERs into the grid, but how those DER systems can support the grid, right? And then, obviously the only way that's going to happen is if people are motivated to do that, right? And if the programs that are actually, created and institutionalized, if those programs make sense to the public, to the installers, to the utility, everybody has to be on the same page. And I think there's some struggling right now to get on the same page. And in part, maybe it's because it's complicated. No state has figured out how to really successfully integrate and aggregate DER resources to support the larger grid. It's all very much like long duration storage in the infancy stage.
Crediting
right?
Hawaiian Electric's recovering lost margins from these customers, allowing for the electrons to be shared from these batteries under a grid service program at retail crediting for the dispatched energy that when the utility calls upon it essentially comes at no cost through the decoupling mechanism. So as everyone except Hawaiian Electric agreed on that last panel, the easiest way for these programs to be successful is customers need to understand them, and the easiest way for that is to make customers indifferent because there's no economic loss to participate. There's performance benefits associated with the program, so it's all upside versus just very difficult, questionable economics that really just make the only choice self-consumption versus sharing electrons during time of need. And in Hawaii, that's not the Aloha spirit. That's not what we're all about.
How do we really create incentive to be able to make the batteries that are useful assets for the grid, pay off, have good return on investment, not only do energy arbitrage for the homeowner and provide the ability to have solar, but also they can take advantage of those assets and make a little bit of money in grid services in some kind of a meaningful way, kind of more, better than the docket that's currently in place. We had rate making, and then we talked to Jennifer Potter a little bit about that, right? We got to find Jenny in there. Jenny's in there somewhere. So that's talking about the specifics of the rates that are being put into place, performance-based regulation, time of use, the new rate structures, and we got a little bit of a taste for what that was all about, right? Rate making and how that actually works. Not the most riveting of discussions all the time. It's kind of real energy wonk stuff.
Sure, but I think it really matters.
But it's super important
at the end of the day, because this is what your bill is going to be based around.
Yeah, exactly. And then we did, of course, microgrids, right? And microgrids, you had a couple of people that we know from years past. We didn't get a chance to talk to Keith Yamanaka, who is the U.S. Army garrison, from the U.S. Army garrison, and I wanted to talk to him. I was excited about that.
Yeah, the microgrid conversation was really deep, but it kind of got derailed by just defining what is a microgrid.
Well, Ted did it.
Yeah, because it was, well, he defined it in one way, but it was very obvious to me, especially by the questions. Like they only had a chance to answer like a couple of the top rated questions, but it was very obvious to me from the other questions that were in there that people didn't agree.
Yeah.
The audience did not agree with the definition of what a microgrid is.
Yeah.
And so it was really kind of like, where do we draw the line?
Yeah.
What is it? I think just building in some additional redundancy, like someone said, just completely disconnected. Isn't that like the epitome of energy redundancy and autonomy? I was like, no, being disconnected is not redundant.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, right. That's not redundant at all. I mean, I think that Ted, and then also we talked to Melissa Miyashiro from Blue Planet Foundation in that session. We talked to Ted Pack from Holuho Energy, and I was hoping to get a hold of Keith, but I just missed him. Our job was to go in after the session and kind of wrangle the speakers and bring them out to our little interview area.
Yeah, some of them knew we were there, and some of them didn't. But I think it's after one of those sessions, like an hour, really hashing it out. I don't blame them for just running for the bar or something. whatever.
I took the leap and got an electric vehicle, my first EV in 2016. I still don't have charging at home. I live in an apartment building, so I live and breathe the public charging network.
So you really know it. Yeah.
So I really know, and I also understand and appreciate that not all people, I work for Blue Planet Foundation, so I'm kind of motivated to get an EV for a variety of reasons, but that's not necessarily a convenient decision that everyone can make.
Microgrid is co-located load and generation with the ability to dispatch. I didn't have the opportunity, but I was going to bring up Samuel Insull. Okay. Samuel Insull is the guy who invented the utility, and he invented the Public Utility Commission. And before he did that, this is, over a century ago. Actually, it's over 125 years ago. People who had electricity, they had a generator in their house, in their basement. And the reason why they were willing to sell that and to get out of it is because the utility offered a lower cost of operation, right? And Samuel Insull, for reasons that made sense, he said, I need to be regulated. I think the industry needs to be regulated because, one, it enables me to get cheaper capital. And his industry at the time was spending gads of capital, and so the cost of capital was a really big deal. But the other is that it makes sense in a world of transmission and distribution lines that somebody gets a monopoly for doing that we don't have a bunch of crisscrossing lines, that we kind of, keep the lane straight. But now in the world of distributed generation, where that's cheaper, and I have the ability to do it, and I have the ability to do it renewably, it's not going to create a bunch of noise. It's not going to, put a bunch of carbon in the air. It's a very different animal. And so we are at they always say, there's an old Indian saying, South Indian, of if you want to know what it's like on the water, don't ask the fish. And we are all fish because we've been living in this world that Samuel Insull and his compadres created. And we're at a point of inflection where we need to think about charting a new path as to what our future looks like. And as I said on the panel, it's our utility is one of the leaders in having to reinvent themselves and think about how do they do what they need to do in a very hybrid kind of grid and do it profitably and sustainably and resiliently. We have a lot of challenges, and Hawaii is a leader in figuring out these challenges of a new grid.
History, like 1900s, right?
Yeah, early 1900s. I mean, microgrids started where you were building your own little electric.
Do you remember
electric barn?
Do you remember Brian Patterson getting into that?
Yeah, exactly. So you have your jar batteries that you would buy. You have old magazine or newspaper articles. You can get your voltage batteries and a few light bulbs, and that was it. You'd have a bunch of jars in the barn and a wire and a light bulb, and you'd have light at night. It was the first time anybody was able to do that. And this is pre-electrical grid, right? You're just running.
You're running your own grid.
running your own little DC microgrid.
You're like in a barn in Oklahoma or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's DC.
It is would be DC because
this is why Brian Patterson was so into it, because we're talking about the hybridization of the grid at Emerge Alliance. That's his whole focal point. So he's like, way back in the when it was a DC little microgrid, and then eventually
you manage your
connected.
own off-grid system that way. So then the grid came along and said, you know what, you don't need all these batteries, and if things keep failing, it's one less thing for you to worry about. We'll just put a wire here and you can plug in.
Right.
And that was the attraction of having a larger electrical grid.
And this was when AC rolled out versus this was the whole Westinghouse
Tesla
Edison
versus Edison.
Tesla Edison thing, right? The AC/DC thing.
Yep.
And ultimately you got AC running along.
Well, AC gives you the benefit of being able to send transmission longer distances. You get less loss. Right. So that was the reason.
Yeah, but that's interesting to see that was the time that decision was made, right? And now, so it was great to hear from Ted. Ted's a really brilliant fella. He's able to get into that.
Well, the pendulum swings, and we're kind of coming back the other way, where DC is more efficient locally, and we should be.
Well, you're
doing that.
This is real Emerge Alliance stuff, but yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm creating in DC, optimizing in DC, running down direct to the battery, storing in DC, and then when I consume it, that's the only time it goes to AC, right?
Yep.
And of course, I take what I need extra from the grid, which is in AC. But it's lossless, and I've been championing.
And then it goes back to DC when you plug in one of those little wall warts, but don't tell anybody.
Right. But the conversation with Brian Patterson now about the hybridization of the grid, and because so many of our loads have contracted, and then now some of the bigger loads like EVs could be powered in DC. We can generate, store, and power our transpo basically all in DC, and then. And kind of minimize some of that infrastructure upgrade requirements for AC, do a whole bunch of stuff in DC, do some stuff in AC. That's kind of the discussion we're having at the cutting edge.
It's a really difficult shift because so many of our regular appliances are already built around this AC grid that we've built for ourselves.
Well, we also saw that it wasn't that difficult for Brian to pull off those rectifiers in the back, and then essentially make them DC appliances. I mean, they did that in 22, right? And RE+ 22 in Anaheim. Was it Anaheim or Vegas?
But it does require a replacement of appliance, and nobody wants. Well, if I'm redoing my kitchen, then that's fine. But I don't just want to have to replace my refrigerator and my microwave and everything else because I'm changed. I mean, it's a big expense.
Well, but I mean, from a practical perspective, we upgrade our kitchens every 5 to 10 years, right?
Really?
That's what Brian was saying. I don't know. But I was thinking about I was thinking about that from the perspective of we're going to rent out our house now, right? So there's this discussion of that. And when we get back, maybe we'll do what Brian recommended, which was take an entire circuit, your entire kitchen, and do in one fell swoop do it in DC.
Yeah, I think if you were doing new construction, it's a no-brainer.
Right.
Other than that, it's going to be difficult.
Okay. So we didn't actually get into this area of the hybridization of the grid, but of course it's on our minds.
Yeah, we couldn't get that far. We didn't get into bidirectionality either because
the next session actually is entitled "Powering Hawaii's Future EV Infrastructure, Electrification, and Bidirectionality." And then they didn't really touch on bidirectionality at all.
Well, they just couldn't get there. There's just not enough time to talk about all this stuff, and they were going very, very clearly through what the current EV kind of rollout is, and then the what do I want to say, requirements, policies for new construction. Or even existing construction, you have requirements for how many handicap spaces you have when you have a parking lot in front of your building, office building or mall or whatever. And then there's going to be requirements that right now there is, I guess, for EV, but it's like one. Yeah. And those spaces are going to be massively increased over time. And pretty much if you have a gasoline car, you're going to have to be walking halfway across the parking lot. You go park underneath the solar panels way over there because all of these other spots are going to be kind of dictated as EV only or handicap only or whatever else. So there's a lot of that going out right now, but the policy is not final yet.
Right. Right. Well, we were able to speak with Garrett Fitzgerald from SEPA. He's right up here, and he is, I think, the director of transportation, maybe in SEPA. Titles and something like that. And we were able to talk a little bit about bidirectionality at that
Finally, we cornered him on it.
Yeah.
Capable chargers.
Yeah.
We still need to make sure we have the vehicles out there,
right,
in a growing number of them. SEPA actually just put together a report called The State of Bidirectional Charging. In 2023. It came out 3 or 4 months ago. And really the conclusion was utilities, OEMs, everyone are really excited and eager to capture that opportunity, but maybe it's a 2025, 2026 thing. So that would be not to throw cold water on it, but we got a lot of things to figure out.
Yeah.
Well, apparently we're in 2024 already, so
yes,
we better get there. But it's always that chicken and the egg problem. You're not going to get a whole lot of vehicles until you have the chargers, and yet no one wants to put the chargers out there because there's no vehicles.
Yeah, and there's one more complicating factor. So we've heard all morning here about the storage and the rooftop solar not having the compensation mechanisms to really enable consumers to want to go that route, want to put a microgrid, and the same is going to be true for vehicles. And so if you have bidirectional capability in your vehicles, that's great. If you really value resilience, maybe you're going to be one to kind of pony up the funds. But until we get the price signals or the tariffs that everyone can take advantage of, I think it's going to be low penetration.
Yeah, I guess it's the promise, right, of bidirectionality, BIDI. I'll try to use that. That kind of saves on syllables. BIDI, the promise of it is what's really exciting.
But don't forget the customer. The customer needs to trust that using their vehicle for this isn't going to degrade their system and has some value to them, right? Because remember, it was mentioned earlier, you buy a car for transportation, and you have to make sure that we keep that in mind. Then you need to continue to have the OEMs to understand the value proposition of offering this. Are customers asking for it? Are customers going to buy it? Are they willing to pay? The answer is yes, some are now. It's hard to know in the future. And that depends on the utilities and if they are putting in place the compensation mechanisms. And then it's a little bit more complicated too because you have regulators that have to approve these different programs.
It is extremely relevant right now because we're seeing these disincentives on the battery side of solar plus battery or solar side for just your general programs with the utility, and we're in a place where PV is inexpensive. It has become a commodity, and you can put in a PV system relatively cheaply these days, and there's great incentives on both the federal and the state side. So we have abundance of energy. We talked about this language, energy abundance, but without abundance of storage, you're kind of not really empowered to be able to take full advantage of that. Right. You're just going to be curtailing a lot because your loads aren't there, or you can't backfeed to the grid, and you're kind of getting, or the storage.
You're not home. You went to the office for the day.
Yeah, but if you have an EV, or more specifically, and you brought it up yesterday, and I've been thinking about it a lot for a while too, 2 EVs. When you've got 2 EVs and one's always there, then the game is just, and you've got bidirectionality, the game is completely changed. And I think you flip the power structure into the hand, you flip the power into the hands of the homeowner.
Right.
And at that point, the homeowner can say, okay, there's no great programs out there. I think it's obvious that you would say, I'm gonna power my EVs with my solar. I'm gonna keep one at home. EV prices are going down, ironically, right now. I've been watching the secondary market for the F-150, obviously, and those prices are coming down, right? They're sitting on the car with this is crazy. The car with one of the, if not the longest, sit on the secondary market right now is the F-150 Lightning. And I'm not sure what exactly the reason for that is, but the bottom line is you can pick one of these guys up. You get a second EV, now that's there, and it's basically a big sink for your renewable energy system you can get. And at that point, you've got the power from both of these cars and the energy from both of these cars. You're probably talking about 200 kilowatt hours at the end of the day, 100, 150 kilowatt hours minimum for 2 EVs, 60, 70 kilowatt hours.
Yeah, but each. It's not just residential, but think C&I, fleet owners.
Yeah.
Fleet owners with all of these EVs. I mean, that's just one big battery bank, and they can leverage that in I couldn't tell you how many ways.
100%. I mean, it's really, really great, to think about that. So that future's right around the corner, folks. And I think we're going to take a little break here, Jay.